Well, hello and welcome to the Tennis Podcast on a Friday night after the ATP Finals semi-finals have just been complete. You are right. I am not Catherine Whitaker. Catherine Whitaker isn't here. There's only me and Matt Roberts. So what's going to happen is anybody's guess. Matt, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. And especially anyone's guess because it's Friday night, it's Disco David. So literally anything could happen.
That's right. Catherine, actually, we say Disco David. Catherine's sent us photos of what seems to be a quite elaborate wine tasting session. So maybe for the best she's not with us.
I think she is still doing the YouTube upload. So if you're watching this on YouTube, well done. Something's
that could be
gone
fun.
Well.
Yeah, that could be. I mean, I'm almost looking forward to that. Listen, we've got plenty to catch up on because we've had a full week of the ATP Finals now, and we've got the semi-finals to come tomorrow. So we're going to take the two groups in turn, the Bjorn Borg Group and the Jimmy Connors Group, and we're going to look at the doubles. We're going to throw ahead to the semi-finals, which I'll give them to you right away because I dare say you know the scores and the results. It's going to feature, who'd have thought it, Jannik Sinner and Carlos Alcaraz in the two semi-finals. Sinner is going to face somebody who he has so many great matches against in Alex de Minaur, but you never know. And we're going to get Carlos Alcaraz against Felix Auger-Aliassime. And it's Auger-Aliassime and his group, the Bjorn Borg Group, that we're going to concentrate on first, because that's the one that has just been completed. And it's resulted in another win for Auger-Aliassime against Alexander Zverev, 6-4, 7-6. So he finishes second in his group. Sinner had already guaranteed his place in the semis before he played against his opponent today in Ben Shelton. But, you know, he's gone 3-0. But that match tonight, Matt, that was a proper knockout match, straight knockout. That's the sort we like. And you could probably feel that in the nerves out there, would you say?
Yes, this was neither player at their best, I would say. Quite far from it, in fact. And I would say Zverev was probably felt like maybe the better player at the start of the match in the opening stages. But once Auger-Aliassime got the crucial break in that first set, which was to win the first set, he broke to win it 6-4. I felt like Auger-Aliassime became the better player for the rest of the match, but couldn't really take his chances. He kept getting either breakpoint chances or sort of half chances, openings like love 30, and he just couldn't quite put the hammer down and convert. And I think there were a lot of nerves there, and it looked for a little bit as well like that second set tiebreak might slip away from Auger-Aliassime, and we could end up in a third set with neither player playing their best, and that would have been really nerve central, I think. But ultimately, quite a familiar story, I would say, in terms of some plays for Auger-Aliassime that were effective for him, you know, going to the slice. Zverev didn't really know what to do off that shot for much of the match. Often would sort of drop it short or hit it in the net and allow Auger-Aliassime to take over with his forehand. Zverev was having a total hot or cold day at the net, and mostly cold. He dunked a lot of easy volleys into the net today. There were a couple that he picked up off his toes that were like, wow. But there was just a lot of like misses. He wasn't convincing up at the net. And I think Auger-Aliassime took advantage of that. And yeah, ultimately, Auger-Aliassime kind of the bolder, bigger player on some of the key points today, and just managed to squeak through even without his best tennis. And yeah, that was enough to get him through the group. And you know, it's Auger-Aliassime who lost his opening match to Sinner, but has bounced back well with a 3-set win over Shelton, and now this one over Zverev, and sort of keeps up his good form that he sort of came into this event with. He was one of the form players coming in, and I think he'll be pretty pleased he's managed to sort of capitalise on that and get through the group.
Yeah, he's done well considering he looked physically impeded in the first match. I mean, he played a great set against Sinner, he lost it narrowly 7-5, and then seemed to hurt his calf. But he did say after that, as the matches went on, he said, look, it's not a problem. I mean, you wouldn't be surprised if you get some tightness, would you, at this stage of the season? I'm mightily impressed with him. When I think back to the chat I had with him just before the US Open, if somebody had told us, I know he'd had a decent first half of the season. He'd won a lot of matches, he'd won some titles, but they weren't anything like what he's gone on to do. I really wouldn't have seen this coming, and so I find that very impressive. One thing that strikes me that we're able to do now that the group stages are complete. Obviously, we know the semi-finalists. We're going to build up to the semi-finals, but we've also now seen the conclusion of several players' seasons. Mm-hmm. One of those being Zverev. Yes, he's still got the Davis Cup finals to come next week, but I mean, we hear a lot of my takes about Alexander Zverev, and you know how unimpressed I've generally been with him throughout the year. I mean, I find it astonishing that he's still at the ranking he's at. I mean, obviously the ranking doesn't lie, but he's lost to so many players. How do you assess it, and what do you expect for the year to come? Because I felt like that was a really regressive performance tonight. The manner in which his forehand just deserted him. You know, by the end of the match, it sort of started off well, and he was being aggressive, and he was going forward a bit, but nowhere near enough, in my opinion. But by the end, he looked lost to me. But I'm curious to know what you think.
Well, firstly, the people definitely enjoy your Zverev takes, so you should definitely give your takes as well. But look, I've agreed with you all year long, really. I think he's going to be in for a bit of a shock next year if he doesn't come close to defending those Australian Open points that are really, you know, bolstering his ranking right now. He's got, over 1,000 points on his ranking is that Australian Open final. And take those away and he's in with the pack. You know, he is in with the pack who are a long way behind Alcaraz and Sinner. And that's the way I see it right now. You know, there's that stat doing the rounds, isn't there, that Zverev is closer in points to the world number 1,000 than he is to the world number 2. And he's the world number 3. And it's really illustrative of the gap between them. But I do think that gap has increased over the year, you know, like start of the season, he obviously reached that Australian Open final. He got absolutely taken apart in it, and it felt then like the gap was big. The gap feels bigger now, I would say, and Zverev feels much more in a group with the likes of Auger-Aliassime and de Minaur and Musetti and, you know, a couple of other players who are maybe injured, like a Jack Draper. You know, he's in that category and going down, I would say, whereas a lot of those are on the way up, looking to pass Zverev. And all of the same things we've always thought about his game have been evident this year to an even starker degree, I would say. You know, not bold in the big moments, not taking on the forehand, and being outplayed by a lot of players. And I know he's talked a lot about having some injuries this season and how that he feels has sort of impeded him this season. And maybe that is the case, but I do think the general trend for him has been just sort of down for a little while now. And I don't really see many attempts to course correct. You know, if I think back a year ago, he was talking in the right way in terms of, I need to try and be more aggressive against the big players. But he's never put it into action. And we've had a lot of data now and evidence to suggest that he's not really going to. And, you know, in the right conditions, when his serve is working, he remains, you know, a very difficult player to beat. And I think, you know, that will probably always be the case. But those things don't often come together. And he's not really been a massive, massive threat for much of this season, I would say, would kind of be where I am with it. And I think probably similar for you.
Yeah. Interestingly, watching Auger-Aliassime felt a bit like watching Zverev against Taylor Fritz tonight. This feels repeatable. This could become another problem player for him, and you can see on Felix's face that he kind of knows what he needs to do to beat him, and he didn't even play that well tonight. To my mind, if I'm Zverev in his camp, I'm thinking of Elina Svitolina, or I'm thinking of, you want to go further back, Mary Jo Fernandez. These are the sort of players who overhauled their standard game to become more aggressive. I do think, from what people with way more knowledge than me would say, is that he's technically deficient in terms of being able to actually do those things. Yeah, that doesn't necessarily work for him. But I think the bigger problem is that in his DNA, he just moves backwards. If somebody stands up to him, like any old bully, stand up to them, they just shrink, and that happens a lot with him. So I agree with you. I think it would be a big surprise to me if he were to defend those points in Australia, and we could be looking at another Medvedev really next year in terms of ranking drop off. Maybe not to that extent, but still, I think we might have seen the best of him really. But we'll see how it goes. The way Felix is playing, it's going to be interesting. We'll preview his semi-final in part 3. But Jannik Sinner is going to be his opponent. He's come through 3-0. He actually probably looked at his weakest maybe against Zverev, I'd say, Sinner. That was when Zverev played well and made a lot of the fact that he had most of the break points. But I find, from a Sinner perspective, Matt, that it might be even more encouraging that he was able to win that with his serve by just fighting off break points, finding first serves, and then winning the big points. Because if he can do that and maybe he's not on top, I mean, how are you going to beat him then? Because his standard game is better than everybody bar one player who on his day might be better, some days might be worse, but the rest of them, what chance have they got?
I found Zverev's comment about Sinner's serve in that match, again, a classic Zverev comment, like almost like whining a little bit about the fact that Sinner made first serves on break points, as though it was, I don't know, lucky or something. It's kind of like when someone says, "Oh, you only won because you've got a good goalkeeper." It's like, well, having a good goalkeeper is a perfectly legitimate thing to have. Like, that's baked into squad building. And like for Sinner, it's like, yeah, I'm going to find my first serve on the biggest points, and you're going to have to deal with that. Like, Sinner, time and time again, is stepping up in those biggest moments in a way that Zverev isn't. And yeah, he has been impressive, Sinner. Even, I would say, without really his absolute best, because he hasn't needed it. He just looks in total control at the moment. I've really enjoyed his body language after he's hit some of these drop shots. Like he's become quite comfortable now playing the forehand drop shot. It's a shot that he is using frequently and efficiently and effectively, and I think he's pleased with himself. There's sometimes
Yes.
there's a little smirk. There's a little, see that? I can do that. And what I am really hoping for is obviously Sinner-Alcaraz, and whether he can deploy it against Alcaraz, against that movement. The guy who we know that is in his head when he's hitting these drop shots. It's all, he doesn't need them to beat Shelton, for instance, but it's a good time for him to practice them. And I think he's used that shot really effectively through the group stages. And I mean, the stats right now are a joke, really, in terms of what Sinner's putting together at this tournament. Just not even dropping sets in it in back-to-back years so far. And he's now on 29 wins in a row on indoor hard courts, which equals one of Federer's streaks. Federer also had a streak of 33 and Djokovic had a streak of 35. But he is, he's up with them in terms of this run of form that we're seeing right now. And he is doing that thing in terms of what they always did, which was just being able to keep the rest of the top 10 guys just at arm's length and just kind of cruise through, have plenty in the tank for what he's going to need if he has to face Alcaraz. I've noticed also he's been doing some interviews for Spanish TV in Spanish, I think, for the first time. Sinner, I think he's sort of feeling himself a little bit at the moment. I've enjoyed seeing that as well. Yeah, he's in a great place. He's looked very, very good. As you'd expect.
It's interesting to me how he's able to just keep his focus. I mean, we've always remarked upon his focus, but today was a dead rubber. You know, and he's not even dropped a set against Shelton, who's obviously come out swinging and, you know, has played some decent stuff this week. I know he didn't win a match, but he really should have won a set against Zverev. He was 6-3 up in the tiebreak against Zverev in the second set of that one. He was up against Shelton. He was up against Felix Auger-Aliassime as well. He was a set up there, and he's got Sinner to a tie-break in this one, but Sinner wins the match in straight sets despite not needing to. I mean, that is something else, and this streak that he's building against Shelton now is becoming pretty outrageous.
Yeah, I think Shelton, from memory, Shelton beat him in Shanghai a couple of years ago, like literally right after post-puke Sinner in Beijing. I think it was the next tournament, and Sinner was just out of gas, and Shelton won their first meeting. But since then, Sinner's won 8 in a row and now 19 sets in a row. And a lot of them, as you say, David, have looked like this in terms of just on the scoreboard. You think that's quite a close match. You know, there's a tie-break in there. I think Sinner only won 9 more points in the entire match. Like, it's not a huge disparity, and yet it's a huge disparity now in their head-to-head and the general feel of that rivalry, if you can call it that. Like, Sinner is winning the big moments, winning all the key points and sets, and yeah, I don't know. Maybe we'd throw this question to you, David. Like, if we're assessing a player's season now that they've all finished, you know, Shelton, that was his last match. Like, where are we with Ben Shelton? Because there have been times when I thought he was making a case for being kind of best of the rest kind of thing, you know, in terms of his slam consistency, and he finally got that Masters 1000 title, didn't he? But actually his record against the top players is not great, and I think he has been a little bit exposed this week. It's felt to me.
Yeah, I think it's a really good year. The fact that he's got to this tournament, he's qualified, and I remember him pushing Alcaraz at the French Open. I thought he was impressive there. He obviously won the one that Sinner and Alcaraz didn't attend, the 1000 in Canada there. So great stuff, well done. And in America, in the hard courts, yes, I think he did kind of look like the next one at that level, around with Fritz, you know, obviously, but maybe the coming man, he felt at that time. But I also feel like that was in slightly artificially inflated because it was in America, because of the benefits I think he gets from playing in front of a US crowd, and the buzz he gets and so forth. And I think the hype he ends up getting is probably not quite in line with the level he's producing. I think he gets a bit better every year. That's a good sign. I think his work ethic is there. I think his dad really knows what he's doing, and they've got a good thing going there. But I don't see him as the next one. I feel like had Draper been fit all year, he's way ahead of him, I think, still. I think, like I've said before, I think Artifice would be ahead of him if he was fit. And I mean, these are just my opinions. There's many that might disagree, but I think he is. There are some limitations still there. He's got incredible strengths, but he does have weaknesses, and I don't think those players at the top have weaknesses. And so, you know, I think he's still got improvements that he will make. I think he will get better, but I also think there's a limit to how much better he'll get, personally, just because I'm not convinced the limitations can be totally overcome. So,
and I suppose the big sort of gutting moment for him of his season still is that shoulder injury at the US Open. We didn't quite get to see, what his full potential was at that tournament when he was probably in his best form of the season with the momentum behind him. You kind of, there's a little asterisk next to that one, I suppose, in terms of, just would love to see him back in that situation, in form, in New York, and kind of see what he can do. But I do sort of ultimately agree with you.
Okay, well, that's the Bjorn Borg Group. We'll come back in part 2 to talk about the Jimmy Connors Group. Well, welcome back to the Tennis Podcast, and we'll start with Carlos Alcaraz, who's guaranteed himself the year-end world number 1 ranking. Matt, going 3-0, it was a rather more eventful journey than it was for Jannik Sinner. Not hugely surprising, but the fact is he won all 3 matches. He's got that number 1 ranking, and boy, did that mean a lot to him. He had the number 1 trophy today presented to him, and that really meant something to him, I thought.
Yeah, definitely. And I thought that was potentially a bit of a trap match for him last night against Musetti, given that he didn't need to win it to get through the group. There was the pressure of knowing if he won it, he would secure number 1. And he was against Musetti, who we're going to talk about, with momentum and feeling and the crowd behind him. I think there was a Carlos Alcaraz of old that would have struggled in those sort of circumstances, but I think we did see some of the growth that he's taken on this year, and he was impressive, and it does mean a lot to him. I think I think he really respects and knows how good Jannik Sinner is, and therefore knows what an achievement it is to finish ahead of him. Even if Jannik Sinner misses a few months of this season, as he did, I think that only adds to it. I think Alcaraz would have thought, well, I've got to finish the year number 1 if I've played a full season, and he hasn't. And yeah, I've been pretty impressed with him, considering that he's not really had a very good record at this tournament generally this time of year. I think this is definitely the best he's looked at the ATP Finals in his career. And just going to throw this one back at you, David. You said early that you felt like you'd be able to tell what kind of form Alcaraz is in, and that opening match against de Minaur took us in a couple of different directions. Like, he started off blisteringly good, then totally lost his way in that first set, and then was incredibly good again in the second set. And I felt like you came out of that feeling pretty good about Carlos Alcaraz and how he's playing this week.
Yeah, it's not been like the US Open, I'll be honest. No. I thought it might be when we saw the first 5 games against de Minaur. I thought, okay, he looks bang on it here. And then we saw him lose his way a bit, and it was a bit more like sort of, I don't know, French Open Carlos Alcaraz, which he still won. But you know what I mean. The US Open level was a different thing altogether.
Yeah.
And look, there have been the lost set against Taylor Fritz, and I think we should come on to that. I mean, I'll give you my prediction about Carlos Alcaraz in part 3 when we do the semi-finals.
I can't wait. Mate. David's been teasing that he's got a theory about these semi-finals, but he won't say what it is.
Yeah, but we aren't always that up on the ATP Finals and the year-end events generally. I mean, they can sometimes be a bit lackluster and lacking drama and lacking players being at their best, and yet there was a day in the early stages of this tournament midway through, when Taylor Fritz took it to Carlos Alcaraz, and I wasn't able to watch the whole match. I watched the highlights later, but you and Catherine were so into this, so into the way Fritz was playing. And I mean, he won the first set on a tie-break. He was keeping it close all the way through in the second set. In fact, he was piling the pressure on early on. I remember there was a really long Alcaraz service game, wasn't there? And he was just piling it on. And not quite managing to win the match, and then eventually Alcaraz turned it around and won. That was the day that we'll talk a little bit about Lorenzo Musetti in a while. That was the day that Musetti got his win as well. So it was all happening that day. It was a brilliant day of tennis, and actually the tournament as a whole, I think, has been a good one this time. But tell us about that match with Taylor Fritz. Why that was so good?
It really is one of the best matches I've ever seen Taylor Fritz play. And I suppose, you can take that one way and say, well, isn't that just a total encapsulation of the problem, right? Because he still lost. And these were in conditions which I would say suit him more than most of the slams. These indoor conditions, I think, would suit Fritz over an Alcaraz. And that's right. That is the challenge, because he can still play that well. And ultimately what it can do is force Alcaraz to reach a level that he doesn't have and just inspire brilliance from Alcaraz. And that is kind of what ended up happening. I think also what ended up happening was that it took so much effort for Taylor Fritz to be playing at that level that inevitably had a couple of lulls, be it of just form or energy or sort of mental locked inness. Because it takes so much to challenge Alcaraz for 3 hours like that. And that was all that happened. Like a couple of poor games and the match was gone. But I do want to focus on what he did well, because he was superb. Really, really good. Alcaraz played a sloppy tiebreak in that first set. But otherwise, this was Fritz really toe to toe with Alcaraz, outplaying him, really going after his shots. And that game you mentioned, the 15-minute game that it took Alcaraz to hold serve, what impressed me the most was Taylor Fritz's service game straight after. I thought, this is the moment everything changes. Alcaraz has had a 15-minute hold. I bet he breaks in the next game. Fritz held in 60 seconds. What a baller move. And then just threw the balls down the other end of the court and was like, go on then, you'll serve again. And that it was like that the presence and the energy of him was I belong here. I really felt like he thought that he belonged. And I was so impressed with him. So impressed. And obviously ended up impressed with Alcaraz for managing to turn it around. And yeah, I don't know how to come out of that match. Do you end up feeling more positive about Taylor Fritz because you've seen something from him that you haven't really seen before?
I think you have to.
I think you have to.
To me, he's Mr. Reliable. He's proved himself over the last 5 years. I think he's been the American number one for the last 5 years. I think he sealed that again.
Yeah.
And but that's not enough for him. He's got more ambition than that. He wants to beat these guys. I don't think when it really matters that he probably will, because he's just not quite. He's not as good as them. They are generational players that he's trying to beat. Sinner, Alcaraz. There was Djokovic. He's a really, really top level player, is Fritz. Apart from those guys. And the fact that he rolled through his service game in 60 seconds doesn't actually surprise me, because he does that a lot. He's just he knows his marks that he has to hit. He doesn't faff about. He just gets the job done. So often he just wins matches, just gets the job done. But then he runs into these players and he doesn't look a threat. That happens a lot. So the fact that he looked a threat in this match, to me, should give him massive encouragement, because he clearly, and listening to him afterwards, he clearly decided he was just going to take it on all the time. He wasn't going to settle into his reliable patterns and then get beaten by a better player. He was going to try to unsettle Alcaraz. And clearly he achieved that, at least. I'd be encouraged by that.
Yes, I think you're right. I think he gave an interesting answer in the press conference, didn't he, in a little exchange he had with Charlie Eccleshare, actually, who's out there for The Athletic. And I think, Fritz is quite a sort of analytical guy. I think he does look at the sort of the big picture of the sport. And I think maybe a couple of years ago, he thought, right, I'm trending up here. I'm improving. Nadal's gone. Djokovic can't go on forever. Could be my time. I think he really thought that if he keeps making the improvements, he would probably win a major. And I think he has kept making those improvements. He's a better player now than he was a few years ago. He's not one of these ones who's just stagnated. He's kept getting better. But he said, we're now in a Big Two era. And I don't think he saw that coming. I think he knew that Alcaraz was brilliant, but I think the fact that Alcaraz and Sinner have just shut everyone else out, I think has maybe spooked Fritz a little bit, and he's done all that he can, and he will continue to, but it just might not be enough. And I almost think in this moment we saw another little him being spooked, because I think he thought that might be enough to beat Alcaraz. He doesn't get the win, and then he was pretty flat in the next match. Ultimately that's the thing with Fritz here. It's such a weird group, the way it's played out. Like, Fritz has got a win in his first match, impressed me maybe more than he sort of ever has in his second match, but he's not come through the group because he's ended up putting in a bit of a lackluster display against a very, very good de Minaur, who we must talk about. But you kind of think you just want him to go again after that Alcaraz and just prove that, okay, even if I lost that, I'm still the next best guy in this group. But I can understand, I suppose, it's just how hard that is after he's given it all against Alcaraz. It is tough to go again, and I think he found that.
And we have seen him have a couple like that this year. You think back to him losing to Gael Monfils at the Australian Open. Gael was fantastic that day, but it shouldn't happen, really, for a player of his level. I think the other thing just to bear in mind is I found the Tennis TV have got all the press conferences on the YouTube channel, and I listened to them all the other morning. And Fritz was talking quite worryingly, I thought, about tendinitis in his knees, and saying that he now can't play consecutive days without quite a lot of pain, like really being impeded and not being able to quite push off and I guess be as explosive as he wants to be. And it sounds as, he says, look, why would I do anything dramatic when I can still play like that against Alcaraz, even though I've got this pain? So that's the way he's looking at it, but it's not ideal, is it? Really, he says the only way you can solve it really is by having time off and kind of realigning and rebuilding and all that sort of stuff. And, well, at least, now the season is over, so hopefully, I hope for his sake that gets sorted out. But he does pound those knees. You think he does, although he wins points efficiently in a way, he's got his patterns, it's physically demanding still. He plays a lot of hard court tennis. He plays a lot of tennis generally. And I just wonder whether we're going to see more of this with players like him who've just been so reliable. Zverev's been banging on about how many injuries he's had this year. These guys have got quite a few miles on the clock. So I am interested to see whether he can go again, Fritz, because as you say, it's one thing having trying to improve your top level so that you can get that win that you're so searching for against the top couple. But what if you sort of lose your floor a bit because you're physically impeded or because you're mentally fried? Or it's a tough sport. You mentioned Alex de Minaur, and on the subject of being a bit fried, what a week he's had. He lost his first two matches, and in his words, he was as low as he's ever been on a tennis court and after a match, after his second match, wasn't it? Was that the one against Musetti? Mm-hmm. He was devastated, and he was so candid in his press conference about how upset he felt and how just fed up of losing big matches. He's had a really good year. He's in the ATP Finals. He's done so many good things. He has spoken openly about his mental health and feeling burnt out earlier this year. And I kind of feel like this was another manifestation of that. Thank goodness he then was able to follow it with an absolutely massive win against Taylor Fritz when it was his turn to do what Fritz did against Alcaraz and just take it to an opponent and just wrestle it from him, play beyond his normal comfort zone almost, but then just get the ecstasy of achievement. I mean, it sounded like he'd already made peace with himself because he'd played on his own terms, but you won't find much of a contrast like that in the space of a couple of days in the players' press conferences.
Yeah, tennis is just such a crazy sport, isn't it? Like you can be stuck in one place for so long, whether it be a certain ranking or, in de Minaur's case, like unable to get a top 10 win as he'd really struggled for one, hadn't he, recently? And that's kind of what he was talking about, sort of almost questioning his own status in the sport, like, do I belong here? That kind of thing. I can't finish these matches off against players similar to my ranking. And then a couple of days later, he gets that win, playing, as you said, super aggressively, really good from him against Taylor Fritz. And then, because Alcaraz beats Musetti, he qualifies for the semi-finals. And he's gone from, in his words, one of the darkest places he's ever been in after a tennis match through to the semi-finals of the ATP Finals, which for Alex de Minaur is a great result, And I think it's a funny group. You got three people there who only won one match and lost two. So you're going to get one of them coming through even with a negative record. But it's Alex de Minaur, and it's just wild how those things can change in tennis, having been stuck for so long. Things just can sort of flip in a day. And Alex de Minaur has experienced that, because that was a brutal loss against Musetti. Like, I'm sure we're going to talk about it a lot from a Musetti perspective, and mostly we've been viewing that from a Musetti perspective, and most people have been viewing that from a Musetti perspective. It's just such a compelling story. But de Minaur let that go. Like, that was a joke, really. It was a brutal loss from him. And for him to turn it around just a couple of days later, I was very pleased for him, because I have a lot of time for Alex de Minaur and his general approach to the sport.
And actually, it feels in a way like everybody won in that scenario in the end, because Musetti only needed the one win. He's had this run to get into this thing where he's just looked so sad and so depleted and so in desperate need of the Maldives, and he's finally qualified because Novak Djokovic has let him in, and he's just, the remains of him almost have been taken to that court each day, and he's done his best, and then suddenly he managed to pull it out, well, with some help from de Minaur, but what a match, 7-5, 3-6, 7-5, to just get his hero's reaction from the crowd, chanting his name. I mean, it was very emotional, very sweet, and he went over to his family, and his wife's crying, and his family are all there, and it felt like he'd won the tournament. He'd won his one round robin match, and now he's on his way home again. But kind of doesn't matter, does it? Because he had his moment, and now de Minaur gets his moment in response.
Yeah, everyone won except Taylor Fritz in that group, I think, is the conclusion, unfortunately, for Taylor Fritz. It was magical, those Musetti scenes. Like, genuinely, like, I didn't know a round robin match could move me that much. Like, genuinely, like, as you said, the circumstances so specific. That was why he's played every week since the US Open. That's why he was so desperate to get to Turin. And it was just amplified because you thought, okay, he has finally made it to Turin, thank goodness. But what state he's in. He's depleted. He hasn't got his legs. Like, how can he compete with the best players in the world? And yet, he was brilliant in that first set. Really good against de Minaur. But then the legs started to go. De Minaur took over. He levels it up. He goes a break up in the third, and you're thinking, okay, this is going to just sort of maybe peter out for Musetti. But he found a spark, and when Musetti finds a spark in a tennis match, he's the guy I say wow at the most at the moment, apart from Carlos Alcaraz. He's the guy who is conjuring up shots and creatively thinking of rallies and points in his head and putting them together in such a fascinating, compelling way to watch. And his changes of pace, his changes of height, his willingness to get the forehand into play in those closing stages, just mesmerizing. There was a point where they both fell on the floor afterwards, a really, really long point. De Minaur won it with a smash, and they both just fell backwards, breathing heavily. It was really cinematic, and yeah, eventually Musetti won it with, you kind of want a great match to end on a great point, and it did. Musetti with a brilliant forehand passing shot, and you'd called it, David. You said either way, win or lose, Musetti is going to be in tears at the end of this one. And the ball had barely left his strings and he was in tears. Like, it was unbelievable. And he suddenly had all this energy. He was beating his chest. He leapt over the barrier. He jumped into his player box. And yeah, I said on our friend's show the other night, he went full Mondo Duplantis and just had an amazing moment and went over and kissed his girlfriend. And yeah, it was a special moment. I don't think he's going to be able to go to the Maldives, is he? Because his girlfriend is so heavily pregnant.
Yeah.
I don't suppose they'll be able
true.
to fly. I think she's expecting very soon. He's pulled out of the Davis Cup. But you're right. He only needed the one, and he got it. And boy, did he get it in special circumstance. It was amazing.
I'd like to make an early request to the draw gods for them to have a rematch in Melbourne in the quarterfinals.
Oh, yes.
That'd be good, wouldn't it?
I hope the draw gods are listening.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
put it in de Minaur's backyard this time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're going to look ahead and make a preview and predictions for the semi-finals in part 3, and also have a look at the doubles. Welcome back to part 3 of the tennis podcast, and as well as the singles, the doubles has been flying along over the last few days. I've been finding myself watching quite a lot of it. I mean, it's been quite intriguing and interesting from a scoreline perspective. A lot of the matches have felt quite similar to me. The men's doubles often does these days. I'm mouth agape at how powerful and consistent they are, but serve does dominate a lot. And we've ended up with four doubles pairings that are seriously strong pairs, and I suspect we're going to get some really competitive semi-finals as well. I mean, there are a lot of British players involved. There's 5 of them in total. So from a sort of British perspective, obviously, I'm quite pleased about that. This is the first time that one country's had that number reach the last 4 at the event since Australia did it in 1992. I mean, that's good going, isn't it? Cash and Glasspool have secured the year-end number 1 ranking as well. They're the first all-British team to achieve that. But you're left with a lineup which is Simone Bolelli and Andrea Vavasori against Harry Heliovara and Henry Patton. And then we've got Joe Salisbury and Neil Skupski against Julian Cash and Lloyd Glasspool. I mean, even though they're all those Brits, I think the whole mixed doubles thing has just meant that I have quite a soft spot for Vavasori all the time these days, Matt.
Yeah, I can get on board with that. Anyone who plays like that at the net, defending the Sara Errani serve, is a hero, really. And the way he took that on at the US Open was superb. And yeah, there is a nice sort of flavour to these semi-finals with like 3 teams with at least 1 Brit in, and then the all-Italian team, in their home tournament. Yeah, and tough to call, I think, from here. But it often is in men's doubles, right? The margins are thin in these matches.
Wouldn't if you told me any one of those four teams was the champion, I wouldn't be surprised. But based on what I've seen, I mean, Heliavar and Patton I saw edged out by Salisbury and Skupski in the group stages, but they both qualified in the end. And these matches, they're on a knife edge so often. But I sort of think Vavasori, he's so used to these big match occasions now, and with the Italian crowd, I mean, it could be dramatic stuff.
And Bonelli just still going.
Yeah. It's cool. Okay, well, I'm going to go for the Italian pair to win it. There you go. I'm on the record. Now, what about these singles semi-finals, Matt? We got Jannik Sinner against Alex de Minaur in the afternoon. What's the record now? Is it 12-0 in the favour of Sinner?
It is indeed. Is that the one you're making a bold prediction on?
Hold on. And then we've got, in the evening, we've got Carlos Alcaraz against Felix Auger-Aliassime. I actually think I could make a reasonably compelling argument for both of them being upsets. Here's my reasoning.
Please make those arguments now. I am all ears.
Okay, so I don't think that Sinner is at the top of his game. Even though he hasn't lost a set, I don't think he's playing as well as I have seen him play. And I think that Alex de Minaur has got absolutely nothing to lose now. Nothing at all. And even Sinner said that.
He did.
Sinner was interviewed. He said he's got nothing to lose. I've got a lot to lose, which I thought, you're both in the semi-finals, mate. But, he knows what it's like. And I think the last couple of times I've seen them play, de Minaur has just made some incremental impressions in those matches.
He got a set in Beijing, didn't he?
Yeah, it's just felt like there are little things he's doing in terms of rushing Sinner. I mean, it's difficult to rush Sinner because he's so fast and so balanced, but he's just taken it on. I think we're going to see de Minaur try to do to Sinner what Fritz tried to do to Alcaraz, and what, frankly, de Minaur managed to do to Fritz. I think the blueprint needs to be the same. Just go for it. Just go for it. And that in itself isn't enough. Sinner plays well, Sinner still wins. But, he's not always going to be on. Not to the very top of his ability. And if he's a bit off, I don't think... one of these days, I think if de Minaur keeps believing, one of these days he's going to beat him. I think, because I don't think he's David Ferrer against Roger Federer, and I don't think he is that. I think he comes at it with more to throw at the opponent, more ambition, more possibilities, more belief, most of the time. I still think Sinner will win, obviously, but I'm just and you may say, oh, you're having your cake and eating it here. Which I'm still going to go for a Sinner-Alcaraz final, because you'd be mad.
I thought you were doing something.
No, you'd be mad not to, right? You'd be mad not to.
For the tape, David has built this up since before we started recording.
Correct.
David was giving it the whole, you wait for my part 3 predictions. I was thinking, okay, I can't wait. And you're going Sinner-Alcaraz.
I mean, listen, it's one thing to make the case for it. It's another thing to actually say you think it's going to happen. I don't think he's ultimately going to win, but I think he could. I think he could win, and I think it could end up being a really much closer score than. I think it's so easy to just say.
The assumption is
Sinner's just going to kill de Minaur. He always beats him. Well, right. I think that's a bit lazy, really.
And I was struck by the Beijing match, like you, and I was guilty of completely writing that match off before then. I think I said it on the pod, I didn't really need to see Sinner de Minaur again. I kind of knew how it went. But de Minaur did show something in that match. He was closer. He was really aggressive. And he is, as as you said, I think the most compelling argument is hopefully some freeness and some lightness for de Minaur. Like, whereas the pressure is on Sinner. But I just can't make a strong case for de Minaur indoors in Italy in a week where he's already lost 2 matches. And Sinner hasn't lost a set. Like, I just think, to me, that the most likely is Sinner in straights, but not a blowout.
I tell you, that drop shot you talk about, Sinner wants to leave that alone. You don't want to be drop shotting that guy, I think.
And he doesn't need to hit it, probably.
No.
So I think
if you
probably
do,
will leave it alone.
I think if you do because you want to use your new toy, then I think you risk getting stung against a guy like de Minaur. On the subject of Alcaraz and Auger-Aliassime, I think Felix will, as long as he's fully fit, and there's no reason to think he won't be, I think he'll likely play pretty well. He'll do what he does. He'll hit good serves. He'll hit good forehands. He'll hit his better backhand. He'll move well. And I think the danger is Alcaraz has got number 1 now. That was the goal, really. I mean, I know he'll say, well, no, winning the tournament's the goal and beating Jannik Sinner's the goal. Of course they are, but you wanted number 1. You've had that big... There could be a drop-off tomorrow. There could be a loss of focus and like a flatness to him. He has been way better this year on that score. He's been repeatable, he's been consistent, but I think against a guy who's just going to keep plodding along in the way that he does, winning his own serve, this is the sort of match where Alcaraz could go a bit walkabout. I'm still picking it to be Sinner, because I just think, well, I mean, it's too persuasive to think that it won't be in the end. But I don't necessarily think I'll be sitting here tomorrow night having just thought, oh well, that was all a bit boring.
There was a part of me that wanted Musetti to beat Alcaraz, because then we would have got Alcaraz Sinner in the semis, and Alcaraz would have needed to win to finish the year number 1. Like, it would have been like number 1 on the line in that match. And look, then we obviously wouldn't have been able to get a Sinner Alcaraz final, which sort of is the ultimate for the tournament, I suppose. But I sort of did like the idea of that being on the line for Alcaraz when he plays Sinner, because I do take your point about potential drop for Alcaraz now that he has secured the year-end number 1. But he has been so good this year at not losing his focus. I could definitely see like him having to come through a tie break against Auger-Aliassime. I think sets could be close, but yeah, Sinner Alcaraz for me.
And who's winning the tournament?
I'm gonna go Sinner. But Alcaraz plays well against Sinner. He really, really does. But I'm going to go Sinner. Indoors, ability to just rush him a little bit more. Yeah. You?
I think the same. I don't think in the end that I saw what I thought I was seeing at the start of that first match.
Okay.
When I thought, okay, well, it's that Carlos Alcaraz, is it? Then, well, I pick him to beat Sinner basically every time if I see that version. But I don't think it is that version. Maybe not indoors yet, and we've seen just 1 or 2 drop-offs still. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun.
It is. And you're right, it has been a good ATP Finals.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it.
We're down on it generally, but I've actually really enjoyed this week.
Yeah, it's been very good. Okay, well, we will be back in a couple of days' time, and we will be live on Sunday night, 8 o'clock UK time, or, well, I mean, that's assuming everything's done. Of course.
Yes, I think the final starts at 5 UK time.
Yes.
So
It has
could
to
be
an
touch
epic,
and go.
But, you know, we'll keep you posted. Keep an eye on our YouTube channel. That's where we'll be live. And, of course, you'll be able to watch it via catch-up and listen to it as a podcast as well. Catherine will be back with us for that. We may even get a bit of bonus Charlie Eccles share. We're trying to see if we can sort that out. He's on site at the moment in Turin, so hopefully he'll be joining us for a little while. A huge happy birthday to Catherine's brother, Matt, which is why Catherine's not here tonight, because she's celebrating with him. Yeah, we can't wait to have Catherine back with us, as well as Catherine's mascot, Phoebe, who's an ever-present. My mascot, Maisie. All right, Maisie. Matt's enormous mascot, Roger. We've also got our top folks and executive producers, Greg, Chris and Jeff, without whom we would not be able to produce the Tennis Podcast. So a huge thank you to all of you, and to just friends of the Tennis Podcast everywhere, because frankly, it is because of friends of the Tennis Podcast that we're able to do this just for a living. It's amazing. But yeah, thank you to you all. And look, if you want to become a friend of the Tennis Podcast, it is worth it, we think. 8 editions of Tennis Relived every single year. We've just produced our latest one on the great Bud Collins, which we lovingly put together. We've produced another 6 already this year. There's still one to come. There's an archive of more than 100 Friends shows now as bonus shows. Those include Q&As with us. We do one of those a month live on YouTube and available as podcasts as well. There's Hannah's brilliant column. She's a wonderful writer. She makes me think about the sport in a completely different way. We have The Barge, which is our online community that you can get involved in and watch matches together so that you've got some tennis company. That's what you get for becoming a friend of the Tennis Podcast, and you help keep the show going. So do become one if you haven't already. And thank you to all of those that are. Thank you also to The Athletic, our partners. We're proud parts of the Athletic Podcast Network. And Matt, we will go and put our heads down because we've got a big day of semi-final action coming up tomorrow. And no football to get in the way. No Fulham, no Albion. It's a bit boring, isn't it?
It's actually a relief.
A nice week off from all the stress.
We can't lose if we don't play.
No, that's right. Let's do that every week. Okay. Well, sleep well, Matt. I'll speak to you tomorrow to natter about the semi-finals, and we'll all come back together on Sunday night to do it all live on YouTube. For now, though, we'll go to bed, and we'll see you in a couple of days.